In a city that never sleeps, a lone guitarist makes his leaps. Fingers dance, strings sing a tale of a dream that feels so frail. Echoes fill the silent night. A lost love, a heart so tight. But in this cold, hard world, hope's just a fleeting word. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, lonely cry. In the cold, hard light, guitar soars through the stormy skies. A melody that pierces the eyes. Love's a memory, a distant dream. In this world it seems. Fingers glide in the fading light. A final note, a last good night. Lost in the shadows, lost in time. Dreams are all we find. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, a lonely cry. In the cold, hard light.
In the shadows where whispers dwell,
1.3.
it's like guitar sings of love's farewell.
10-4, I just wanted to know if
Echoes of the heart once bold, now lost in the night's cold fold.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on
Secrets
the property
hidden
case. I'll be 70
deep
seconds
within,
of the police throw that.
tales of love that couldn't win. Promises made in moonlight's glow, now broken like a shattered show. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, holding on today. Memories of laughter and tears, in the silence they appear. Whispers of a time so true, when love was all we knew. Lost in the echoes of the past, wishing for what we had. In the dark we search for light, holding on to what we fight. Through the pain, through the night, we find strength in the fight. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, to think.
21.
Start me a card for a parking problem.
Foreigner 23.
Innocence 4, I'll be 28 on truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
All right, hey guys, good evening. Thanks for joining me. Good to see family and friends here because really all my friends in this, all the friends I developed through this case and through this channel feel like family now to me. But I also hope, because at least for the beginning of this video, that we will have free care and read people here. They're always welcome here as long as they're respectful. But I want to address this almost an olive branch kind of way, but I want to address this to them. And so I was thinking about this during the day and whipped this little thing together before the show after supper. So let me go through it for you. I want to address the many good people who believe Karen Read is innocent. I know how many of you feel about me. It's human nature to demonize the other side. People on this side get mad at me when I tell that too. So when I tell them that Nick Rocco isn't such a bad guy, or they get upset when I argue that there's no substantial evidence, in my opinion, that Karen knew in that moment that she struck John, let alone that she intentionally gunned it in his direction. Get it. I understand the passions, and we're all sorting through complicated evidence. There's a lot we don't know and may never know. And a range of opinion is natural. None of us carries the seal of certainty. None of us holds all the truth. What I want to do is cast our eye into the future, not a distant future, but a future that's just around the corner. What do we want that future to look like? As I reach out to the free care and read people, I ask you, is there some common ground that we share? Is there a basis on which to build something we all agree on? Now, some of you new around here may not know something about me. I was once admired and respected by free care and read. That's right. I was, in a sense, one of you. I leaned towards there being a conspiracy. Very early on, I even did a video where I debated the pros and cons of Turtle Boy. I had only followed him for a few weeks. Now, my objections to his methods were starting to grow early on, but I ended up concluding at that time that on the whole, his impact was positive. Does that surprise you? The video is still up if you want to see it. I don't take my videos down. I'm not Mike Crawford. Look, the lesson of this whole Karen Read experience for me was a reminder of how much growth I still needed, how ignorant I was about many things, and how much I needed to learn. Now, before this, I had never read a Turtle Boy article or seen his show. That's before April of 2023 when he first started championing the defense theory. Throughout my life, I have come to mistrust the mainstream media. I have seen it slant or suppress stories over and over, which means I welcome the role of alternative media. I still believe in independent journalism strongly. In the age of YouTube, there's a danger. I've discussed it many times. Maybe we'll go over this later. But for now, let's recognize that there is a vital role for citizens who want to do their own analysis. Sometimes their work can break down the walls of the mainstream media and succeed in bringing truth to the general public. So maybe that's an area of common ground for us, right? On both sides on this case. I also believe there are a fair amount of innocent people in jail. Most of these involve investigators or prosecutors falling victim to a rush to judgment, having tunnel vision. Sometimes police unwittingly pressure suspects into false confessions after many hours of grueling interrogation. Sometimes the process is more corrupt, might involve bias. And on very rare occasions, there are cases where evidence is planted by police. In those situations, because the mainstream media is usually aligned with the local power structure, it can fall on independent journalists to uncover the truth and to seek justice. In my experience working in the city of Worcester as a bartender and eventually an owner, I had 20 years of close dealing with the police. Excuse me a second. I employed several, played softball and drank with them. It was only a few weeks after I started working as a bartender. I was only 21 at a dive bar called the Blarney Stone that I witnessed police corruption firsthand. In fact, I almost I got threatened with arrest. I won't tell you the story, but it's a bad feeling when you're up close to it like that. And it would not be the last corrupt thing that I saw. However, that kind of thing was not at all the norm. The overwhelming majority of cops I dealt with were honorable and decent, regular people. Sometimes some of them might be bitter and frustrated because they felt the bureaucracy prevented them from doing more to keep dangerous people off the streets. Most of them either lived in the city or had roots there, friends and family. Corruption exists in any large human activity, especially any government one. Police corruption exists in every significant city. It always has. It always will. But the vast majority of cops are not part of that. Still, we can find common ground in this too. We all think that police must be held accountable by local government authority, but ultimately by citizens themselves. So we have a lot in common here, right? We're mistrustful of standard media. We know that police corruption, though rare, can do terrible damage. And we know that sometimes people are falsely prosecuted. Well, here's something else. I believe strongly in citizens standing up against injustice. That's a core part of the American identity. We don't just sit back and wait for some government agency to make everything all right. We have a mistrust of authority, which includes both the media and the government. That mistrust of authority is healthy. It's a source of our strength, a foundation of our liberty. Just checking to make sure my mic is still working. All right. The vision of the future I think most of us share includes all these things. Citizens who hold police and prosecutors accountable, a vital role for independent journalists, the right for each of us to ask questions, form our own opinions, speak our own mind. But I have some questions for FKR. Now, I know most of you are decent people, and I hope you'll have the courage to consider these questions. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." This case has been a journey for many of us, and the questions I have are things you will be asking yourself anyway in the not too distant future as you look back. So I just think you'll be happier if you ask them now. Please accept them in the generous spirit that they're intended. And trust me that I ask these kinds of soul-searching questions of myself all the time and have all along in this case. First question. Do you feel any hesitation about accusing someone of a serious crime when there was essentially no evidence? Sorry, just message from Court TV. This is a strange time. Let me just check it. Okay. Just Court TV, seeing if I can join them Monday. All right. So I'm sure I'll be on with Nick again Monday. Court TV, 9 o'clock. But back to my question. Do you feel any hesitation about accusing someone of a serious crime when there was essentially no evidence? Take Colin Albert, for example. There is absolutely no evidence of any animosity between him and John O'Keefe. There's substantial evidence that he left 34 Fairview at least 5 minutes before Karen and John pulled up in the Lexus. Judge Cannoni, who has been giving the defense as much latitude as she can and as she should, won't allow Colin to be presented now as a third-party suspect because the defense has not offered a single piece of supporting evidence. Not a single piece. So do you hesitate in trying to destroy this kid's life? If you've participated in such efforts, do you feel any remorse? I mean, do you feel any remorse at trying to destroy the kid's life based on a conspiracy theory floated by a defendant and a bunch of grifters on YouTube that clearly, whatever you think of the case here, a lot of the people that are the loudest voices on YouTube have no interest in the truth. Nobody would really trust them. Even people that believe pretty strongly that Karen Reed might be innocent or there was something here. I think most of these people have enough common sense to understand what Turtle Boy and the Glare and most of these guys are. Melanie Little, they're not interested in the truth. Well, do you understand how organized the efforts have been to go after Colin and his family? I mean, this is really where you must do some soul searching. If you take a hard, long look in the mirror, do you see something a little disturbing? Did you take pleasure in going after this kid or seeing others go after him? The point is not to wallow in guilt. The point is to develop a deeper understanding of yourself. Has there been something selfish in how you've reacted to this defense theory? If you found some pleasure in seeing the mob attack Colin or any of the other witnesses, or in Turtle Boy relentlessly hounding them with late night calls, why? Why was that amusing to you? Don't feel guilty. These are this kind of, like I said, the ingredients are within all of our brains. It's not about feeling guilty. It's about taking a hard enough, if that's not truly who you are, then you take a hard enough look and you say, is that really what I want to be? And has this impacted my judgment on all of this? We're all human beings. We all have the same ingredients inside our heads. We're all capable of being nasty and vindictive. We're all capable of acting differently once we are within a mob. When people are part of a large anonymous group, their sense of individuality can diminish. This process, often called de-individuation, reduces self-awareness, which in turn lowers inhibitions. Without the usual constraints provided by personal accountability, individuals may engage in behaviors they would normally consider unacceptable when acting alone. In crowds, responsibility tends to become shared among all members. This means that each individual feels less personally accountable for the collective actions of the group. This diffusion of responsibility makes it easier for some to act out aggressively or destructively because the burden of blame is not solely theirs. Seeing others engage in certain behaviors, especially if these actions are met with immediate rewards or seem to go unpunished, can trigger a kind of behavioral contagion. In a mob, one person's aggressive or impulsive act may quickly be mimicked by others, amplifying the behavior throughout the group. The energy of the crowd tends to create a feedback loop where actions are rapidly replicated. Now, I was at Karen Reed hearing in August this year. Beautiful summer day. Hundreds of pink shirts. When the O'Keefe family arrived, the crowd, and I mean almost all of it, booed them loudly. And not even the defense has accused the O'Keefes of being complicit in the conspiracy. Now, these people have lost two of their children to tragedy, and all they're doing is quietly showing up to the trial. And for that, this mob has repeatedly booed them. Now, that's indecent behavior. You will, trust me, every decent person, every person who has some amount, some level of decency within them, that at some point booed the O'Keefes just for walking into court. Most of you, if you have any decency in you, a year from now, 2 years from now, you're either going to wash it from your brain and pretend that you never did it. You're going to pretend that you never booed because it's too painful to think that you might have been that way. Or you'll think back and be shocked. You'll think back and be shocked and say, wow, I cannot believe what kind of person was I that I was booing a victim's family. Now that demands some soul searching. And what is it that the mob wants that drives them to boo a victim's family? Like I said, I know within that mob are plenty of decent people. And I know that many of them nonetheless booed the O'Keefes. And they've done other things and participated and cheered on other indecent things. The easy thing is to say that these are not actually decent people. But I think that's a mistake. There are larger forces at work here, things steeped in the psychology of group dynamics, like I just talked about. A mob is like a living entity. It needs to feed. It needs victims. The important thing is that when you're part of a mob, you're not actually being yourself. But aren't there other things that can lead to the same result where people maybe online are not actually being themselves in the way they behave? For instance, I think back to And this led to a moment of me not being myself. But a few months ago, when they were once again going through this phase of accusing me of faking cancer, I went on my patient portal online and showed it to the public. And this woman named Bibby from turns out she was from Australia. She claims to be a nurse, claims to have stage 4 cancer herself. And I'm looking back through chat and I saw her questions and I misinterpreted them. I thought she was somebody because of the nature. She was asking these probing nature of my specific things about my cancer. And I misinterpreted that. What I thought was she was someone herself, either herself or a close family member was suffering through this, because I've had a lot of communication from people like that over the last 6.5 years since I was diagnosed. And I thought she wanted a little support. And people with this kind of cancer form a natural bond with other people that have that. And when someone needs support, you give it to them. And so I replied in my right here on the air. I said, "Listen, here's my email. Please email me, and I'll give you my phone number, and we can talk." But what I had no idea was she was not asking me these questions because she wanted support, whether to offer it or to receive it. She was on the hunt to prove that I was faking cancer. Why? Because she's a free Karen Reed person. That's the only reason. So because she's free Karen Reed, and I am exposing the lies of that defense team, then it's necessary for her. It makes her feel better about herself to try to destroy me, to try to take me down. So she's in there saying, and so because so after that show ended, people sent me a clip that she had gone right to Twitter to say that I can confirm I have stage 4 cancer myself, and I'm a nurse, and those things that Kevin Lenihan put up on there are not true. It does not mean what he thinks he does. He does not have cancer. God, I only wish that were true. Trust me. Every day this week, I've gone for radiation. I got to do the same thing all next week. And then the week after that, more radiation and then chemotherapy. I feel great. I don't want sympathy, but I'd rather not have to go. I'd rather I was a fake like these people think. But what causes normal people, let's give her the benefit of the doubt that she really does have cancer and that she really is a nurse. What kind of person that isn't, and she said she was a mother, I think too. So she's a mother, she's a nurse. My heart would go out to someone like that. But what kind of person like that is trying to prove that someone else is faking cancer just because of a criminal case that's in a country that's on the other side of the world of her? This is the madness that this case continues to go through. So I want people in the free Karen Reed world on the side to put themselves into a viewpoint of a year or two from now and wonder how they reflect back on their behavior. What caused them to act like that? Do they project some of their own frustrations and disappointments in life onto Karen Reed, making her the victim that they see themselves as? Do they buy into complicated and incredibly unlikely theories that normally they never would for some deeper psychological or emotional reason? I mean, you have to ask these questions, but they have to ask it themselves. You have to look in the mirror and say, am I the kind of could you have ever seen yourself as being the kind of person that would doubt somebody else's cancer for no reason? The kind of person that would boo a victim's family, that would accuse people of murder when there's no evidence against them, and just say it casually and publicly to write on the bottom of thousands of rubber duckies that Colin did it and throw it in the store of his father? Is that normal behavior? It's not normal behavior. And but what I'm not saying this to criticize you. I'm saying this, you're going to know at a certain point, a year or two from now, that what you participated in was wrong. And I want to save you now. It's not too late to take that look. Do you really think it's sensible to believe that Jen McCabe, a former elementary school teacher with no criminal record, a PTA type mom, coaching her daughter's sports, going to all their games, Do you think that this type of person is a criminal mastermind? Really? Hannibal Lecter? Jim McCabe? A year or two from now, looking back, you will cringe when you recall how you thought Jen only went along searching for John that morning in the car just so she could whisper into Karen's ear and convince her to say that she hit him. Yeah, that's what they think, because that's what they have to think. This every aspect of this conspiracy theory, this is where it started coming apart for me as I would ask questions like this in the early months after Turtle Boy put it out. Now, Turtle Boy had put out the defense theory, and as he put that out, uh, he no doubt was asking a lot of the same questions that people like me were. Now, to people like me, the more we dug deeper into this and found questions like that and realized it didn't make sense, we started to doubt the whole conspiracy theory and recognized that what it was a defense theory stitched together like defense teams do to try to create reasonable doubt. Now, Turtle Boy didn't go to those conclusions because they weren't in his interest. So what it forced him to do would come up with increasingly absurd, completely absurd ideas. And this was one, the idea. So people had asked, why would Jen McCabe ever take that call at 5 a.m. from Karen? And why would she get in that car with Karen to go searching for John, to go back to the crime scene? Nope, that's not what somebody would do. Somebody who had just participated in murder would want to stay as distant from that scene as possible. You're talking about a true psychopathic, sociopathic killer that would be able to do something like that. But Turtle Boy said, well, no, she had to do it because she wanted to get in the car and convince Karen that she did it. What does it, I'm telling you, a year or two from now, when you look back and realize all the things that you believed, you're going to go crazy. You're going to be like, why did I ever believe that stuff? What will you think from this future vantage about a theory where the McCabes, as normal as any American family as you'll ever see, drove back home after leaving the Alberts house, knowing that the plan was to put their friend, John, out on the lawn, their own lawn, alive, to die from hypothermia? Will you still think that was a sensible theory to believe in? That they left the Alberts home after having seen John mauled by a German Shepherd and beaten up by 3 men? They left there knowing that the plan was what exactly? To leave him on their own lawn and say that a vehicle struck him? That was the plan? The McCabes were giving Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson a ride home. You think that not one of these people wouldn't believe that this plan was doomed to fail and that they were all destined to go to prison? Unless they went right to the police. Not one person in that car had a sense of self-preservation. None of the McCabe parents had a sense of preservation of their family. It's just stunning to me that people believe this stuff. And even when they finally learned that the FBI was investigating, no one ran to the feds to cut a deal before it was too late. You don't ask these questions? I know you're smart enough to ask these questions. The question is what is blocking you in your mind? That's what my theory here is. It's not that you're stupid, and it's not that you're indecent, a bad person. There's something deeper going on that is causing decent, otherwise intelligent people to somehow avoid asking fundamental, basic questions like this. Because the conspiracy theory is utter madness. And the deeper you dig into it, it's so obvious that something psychological, some blockage there is what gets in the way of people asking those questions. Now, I'm sure that many people within FKR are decent and intelligent enough to see this for the nonsense that it is. So what gives? What is driving this phenomena? The time for soul searching is now. Wait longer and it'll be too late. The feds found no evidence of cover-up. The highly experienced auditors found no evidence. For those many among you that are decent, intelligent, and who share the values I mentioned earlier, it's not too late to start undoing the damage so we can get to that future that we do all believe in. All right, guys. Looks like my mic stayed on for that, so that's good because I was reading off the prompter. I had scripted that earlier, most of it, kind of scripted it in notes. And I have a video that I want to play from Jams So, but first, let me just say hi to everybody. And then we're going to go over an article from his most recent from the Anonymous Mass Lawyer. So let me just say hi to everybody that's here first, though. Thank you, Alexa. So I'm not sure what you mean by what happened to victims' rights. I mean, yeah, I mean, the victims' rights, the victim's family has rights. Yep, absolutely. I think that's what you mean. And hi, Bev Murphy. San Antonio News. Is that actually like a news source? That's awesome. My King of Kings says that I don't know if that's a he, right? Has witnessed several change their minds. Yes, I've experienced several, many change their minds, and some of them are here in chat, and they become good, great regulars, valued members here. So I do believe people will come around. Michelle 4 or Michael 4. I'm feeling great. Thank you. Hello, Artworks, and it's not for us to decide, but it is for a jury to. It is for a jury to decide, but we are looking into this, right? And there is a mob out there, so there is a mob that demanded an audit by the Canton police. So there is a vital role in the public trying to get to the bottom of this. Of course, ultimately, it's the jury that decides, but we're seeing a massive effort to try to undermine the jury by the defendant in this case. That's just calling a spade a spade. They've made that clear. Even Nick had kind of said said what he wasn't supposed to say out loud in his way a month ago when he said, "Well, we're just hoping that our message has gotten to enough people that there will be another hung jury and the state won't want to try it again." That's the plan. That's the plan. Drops of Jupiter says that she hopes the Lexus data is bulletproof. Well, first of all, it is bulletproof already, but I know what you're saying, that you won't have to cause them to do any correlation with John's phone. Hey Deb, that's my old Deb. That's my friend from college. Good to see you, Deb. And Deb was on the basketball team in college too. She's nervous that Karen Reed told reporters she's happy with the jury. Well, she's automatically going to do that too. So their job is to present themselves as looking confident. They even said that in A Few Good Men. They said you at all times look like you're confident and in control. All right, so let's go to Jam's video. I put my headphones on.
John O'Keefe's death was a devastating loss, and sadly the tragedy of his loss has had a ripple effect. What has unfolded since that night is something no one could have imagined. As Karen Reed stands to face her second trial, once again claiming innocence in the form of a conspiracy, simple bystanders have become unexpected victims. These witnesses have courageously stepped forward to share what they know about that night, but their truths don't fit into the narrative Karen Read and her supporters are so desperate to sell. And for that, they've been harassed, targeted, and vilified. Imagine being an ordinary person drawn into an extraordinary situation, only to have your integrity questioned and your safety threatened. This isn't justice. This isn't accountability. This is cruelty. They've become the silent casualties of a story that was never theirs to begin with.
She's innocent. We
Hey,
know.
Carol, you like donuts too?
Yeah.
Guilty people.
Yeah. That's it.
Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read! Free Karen Read! Clown! Albert, you're clown! Clown town! You're clown town! Clown town! Free clown town! Free Karen Read! Clown town! Liars! Corrupt individuals! Go fuck yourselves! Clowns!
Welcome to Longwood Galleria. Let's get justice for John O'Keefe. We got Brian Albert sitting in the front. Woo! Shout out to you. Cough killer. Cough killer.
My point is not I need to call Jennifer McCabe back. I've done the damage that needs to be done on Jennifer McCabe. The point is...
I'm sorry, I missed that. You've what?
I've done the damage that needed to be done on Jennifer McCabe. I don't need to call her back.
Sadly, these moments are just the tip of the iceberg. The harassment John O'Keefe's family and these innocent witnesses have endured goes far beyond the steps of the courthouse. It's systematic, insidious, and relentless, designed to intimidate, discredit, and silence anyone who dares to share the truth. Behind the scenes, a coordinated campaign of lies and misinformation has taken root. Blogs are written about anyone that dares to threaten Karen's narratives. And these blogs twist the truth and paint these witnesses as villains instead of the courageous truth tellers that they are. Social media has become a battlefield where baseless accusations and outright fabrications are spread like wildfire, each one seeming to be more damaging and a little more outlandish than the last. And it doesn't stop there. Some of the loudest voices fueling this harassment are influencers and YouTubers, people who have made it their mission to profit off of this tragedy. They post video after video packed with harmful gossip and unfounded claims, feeding into a conspiracy theory that has no foundation in reality. These creators aren't seeking justice. They're seeking clicks, views, and ad revenue, all at the expense of the innocent. This isn't just about online rumors, though. It's about the devastating impact this has on real people. Witnesses who once felt safe in their communities now live in fear. Families have been affected in more ways than one. People have had their reputations tarnished, their mental health shattered, and their lives turned upside down, all because they dared to tell the truth. It's a witch hunt. And it's happening because some people would rather destroy others than face the uncomfortable reality of the truth. But make no mistake, the truth matters. The truth is worth defending. And those who speak it deserve our support, not our scorn. They deserve to be protected from the kind of cruelty we've seen unleashed against them.
Excuse us. Excuse us.
It's a little...
Alan, what did you think about Brian Albert, Colin Albert, Jen McCabe showing up to court today with the O'Keefe?
Oh, I think it's a joke. I think they were doing it just for some sort of intimidation factor, probably for the jurors. It just plays into their countenance as bullies. That's all that was about.
Here's the hardest part to say out loud. The harassment, the lies, the gossip, the deliberate attempts to destroy the lives of people who've done nothing but speak the truth. It hasn't stopped. This isn't something that happened once and faded away. The harassment is still happening, day after day, week after week. These witnesses and John's family continue to be stalked, slandered, and silenced, all while the world scrolls past, distracted, or even worse, complicit. And why? Because they told the truth? Because they didn't buy into a conspiracy theory that protects a woman accused of killing a police officer, someone who dedicated his life to service, to safety, and to doing what's right. It's a heartbreaking reflection of where we are as a society when truth is punished and loyalty is blindly given to someone accused of taking a life in cold blood. Somewhere along the way, the loudest voices convinced the crowd to turn its back on those who needed us most. But it's not too late. We can still choose to do the right thing. We can stand with the innocent. We can speak up for the people who've been bullied into silence. And we can remember who the real victim is in all of this, John O'Keefe. Do not let the noise drown out justice. Do not let conspiracy become louder than truth. And never forget the silent victims, those still living through this nightmare, who love John O'Keefe, who deserve our protection, our support, and our humanity.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I'll stand my ground. Won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got
I hope I won't get a copyright for the song.
in a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I'll stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I stand
All right, that was from Jams. She did a great job. I actually had not seen that. I'm seeing that for the first time now with you guys, and it was kind of cool because it juxtaposed kind of well with the comments that I began with. We're all grappling with what kind of fight this is, right? I mean, the level of cruelty and willful ignorance that dominates the thinking of the other side is disturbing to all of us precisely because we know that many of those people are not probably bad people. But what they're doing is clearly cruel. Is this something that they would normally do if they acted like that before? I don't think so. But it's frustrating to watch John's family and obviously the innocent witnesses, fellow citizens, a community being destroyed because I'll have to go back and get the link. I closed it. Sorry. That was Jams. Yeah, I closed the window. Sorry. But we're just sitting back as a society and we're letting this go on. We don't ask the kind of questions that I talked about at the during my opening. We don't ask any questions. The people in the free care and read movement don't ask any of those questions at all. Their minds, I got to think that they're smart enough to ask them. There's something blocking. There's a wall there. So there's something emotional that makes this case important to them in a personal way. And that prevents them, that causes them to build up these barriers that they won't break down and ask just normal, fundamental, obvious logic questions that I got to think that most people would normally ask. But for some reason, they're not here. And, but I don't want to, the path forward is not to create further antagonism. You want to see us at a point a year or 2 years from now where we've learned a lesson from this. And that the people within FKR have learned the wisdom of have learned the error of their ways. And and if that sounds arrogant, I'm sorry, but you watched Jam's video and you use what I've told you and you've seen all that we've seen. Yeah, it is error of their ways. What they're thinking is not logical. It's and the way they're behaving is cruel. And so it leaves you with the choice of either believing that they're incapable of logic and are naturally cruel, or something else is going on. And I prefer to believe that something else is going on. And if they do enough soul searching, many of them will find a way through. And there are many people here in chat who've gone through that process. Everybody has a different speed for getting through it. Eyes on Heaven says, I hope you cover another case after this. So yeah, that's the plan, and have some cases that have been in the works. And there are some things in the works. So that's absolutely in the works. I don't know what I'm going to do, to tell you the truth. I mean, so the publisher gave me yet another kind of nasty message today. This publishment has been extremely difficult to work with. Doesn't treat their writers respectfully. Consistently states things that are false. It's troubling to me. Yet I want it to succeed because they're one of the few publishers that will put the resources into publishing someone that has not previously been published. So they're not, they want me to publish another book on the Karen Reed case and throw it together quickly. And which I've said is I will do it only if I can find an angle that feels really interesting to me and it adds something fresh and something that the public needs to see. I don't want to do it. I want to move on. I prefer writing fiction, to tell you the truth. But so, I don't know how much time I have left a year seems to be a reasonable number. So when you have that kind of time, what would you do with your time? It could be less than that. Do I want to, if I have a year left, do I want to spend 3 more months writing another Karen Reed book? I don't know. So we'll see where it goes. I want to read. Let's see if I can find this. All right, I got it. And I'm going to bring this on the screen for you guys. I'm making sure nothing else is up here. All right. This is another article by anonymous mass lawyer who does a fantastic job. And this is an interesting thing that it's good because it's interesting. This is a somewhat unique point of view that you wouldn't expect to see this from a lawyer necessarily. So, all right, the title is "The Presumption of Innocence Doesn't Apply." The presumption of innocence does not apply outside the criminal courtroom, nor does the reasonable doubt standard and the prohibition on making negative inferences when people plead the fifth. So, reading from his article, one thing I find endlessly annoying in the true crime world, and in particular in discussions of the Karen Reed case, is the constant misuse of criminal law concepts like presumption of innocence. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about from a recent Twitter exchange with Brandy Churchwell. Brandy says, the fact that you, meaning anonymous lawyer, see pleading the fifth in a situation like this as hiding the truth says a lot about your perspective on constitutional rights and presumption of innocence. Anonymous lawyer says, Brandy, you're not a juror. You're a commentator. You're not prohibited from making basic logical inferences. Even jurors in civil cases are allowed to make negative inferences when someone pleads the fifth. The presumption of innocence, he says, is not a thing that applies to anyone outside of the criminal courtroom setting. It is not a logical concept. It is a legal construct designed to ensure that the burden of evidence in a criminal trial is put on the prosecution. Indeed, as the vast majority of people charged with crimes are in fact guilty, it would be absurd as a matter of logical inference for those of us reading about cases in the news to presume that criminal defendants are innocent. The vast majority of them are not. Similarly, the concept of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is unique to the criminal courtroom setting. It is a standard of proof that, for good reason, exists to minimize the possibility of innocent people being wrongfully convicted of crimes. But it is not a standard that anyone other than a seated juror should be applying to their analysis of a criminal case. As we go about our lives and try to understand the world around us, as we try to form opinions about what is true and what is not true, the standard we should and generally do apply is a much, much lower standard. It's essentially the standard used in civil cases. In other words, based on everything we know, we believe things if we conclude that it is more likely than not that they are true. So in a civil case, that's the standard. It's more likely than not. In a criminal case, it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, as it should be at a much higher standard. The same is true with respect to people's invocation of the Fifth Amendment. The notion that no negative inferences should be drawn when someone pleads the fifth is not a logical concept. It is a legal rule that applies only in the narrow context of a criminal trial. It's a protection that exists to prevent criminal defendants from being compelled to testify against their interests. But no one outside of the criminal trial has any obligation to switch off their brains and not make completely rational inferences about someone's decision to plead the fifth. So yes, if someone pleads the fifth, you're not wrong from drawing a conclusion that they're likely guilty of something. Otherwise, why plead the fifth? Now, a juror could not think that way, but we are entitled to think that way. And in fact, more often than not, if we don't think that way, we're probably not being very logical. Let me continue with his article. Indeed, in the context of a civil trial, jurors are permitted to make negative inferences if a witness elects to plead the fifth. So a juror can draw that conclusion in a civil trial. So a civil trial doesn't involve the state. It's one party versus another party. We may well see this play out in the context of a wrongful death lawsuit against Karen Read, which is currently pending, and the defamation suits against Turtle Boy that are likely to be filed after Karen's criminal case is resolved. In those cases, if Karen or Turtle Boy chooses to plead the fifth, the juries can and will hold that against them. The same is obviously true of the rest of us who aren't jurors at all. And that's because it is rational and logical to infer that someone who pleads the fifth may be trying to hide something incriminating. Conversely, it's also logical to infer that the witnesses who are choosing to testify under oath again and again are less likely to be hiding anything. We can simultaneously believe in the constitutional rights of the accused without lobotomizing ourselves and abandoning our rational faculties. From the standpoint of a citizen or a media commentator or anyone else other than a juror in a criminal case, concepts like the presumption of innocence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the prohibition on drawing negative inferences from the invocation of the Fifth Amendment are only relevant if you are trying to predict the outcome of a criminal trial. They should not factor into your personal belief about what happened in any particular case. In the Karen Read case, for example, your personal belief as to whether Karen Read killed John should be based on your analysis of all the reliably known facts in the case, whether or not they are ultimately admissible in court. And it's perfectly okay to believe something, even if there's some room for doubt. It's also okay to draw negative inferences from Karen and Turtle Boy's refusal to testify. And most importantly, it's also perfectly okay, and indeed much more logically defensible, to begin your analysis with the presumption that the person who has been indicted for the crime is probably the person who committed the crime. Indeed, it should take some pretty compelling evidence to convince a rational person to believe that someone else is actually responsible for that crime. This is why it drives me absolutely crazy when FKR commentators say things like this. Brandy Churchwell again. There's no evidence of her innocence. That is logic. The defense doesn't have to give evidence of innocence. Yikes. And Anonymous replies, actually, they do. The prosecution has a ton of evidence, more than enough to meet their burden. You actually do need to, so you really should probably put it therefore here. Therefore, you actually do need to offer counter evidence in that situation. No defendant has ever gone with the I was framed defense when the prosecution didn't have a super strong case. So what he's saying, and he has said this before, and it's a strong point, is that if the prosecution's case against Karen was weak, then they wouldn't need to go with the I was framed defense because it's almost impossible to prove that. And one thing that amazingly, not one piece of evidence has ever been shown to anybody that's in any way documents that any manufacturing or altering or planting of evidence in this case. Nothing, not one thing. And this is, and if there was a case where you're more likely to find it, it would be here because you had the feds and make an enormous effort to find it, and they didn't find it. So that's huge. So to even make that claim, in terms of the public analysis, to go with that I was framed, any normal, decent human being, rational, logical, should look at that and say, that's not too likely, Mr. Defense. Not too likely. All right. So he goes on. Yes, it is true that in a very technical legal sense, Karen and her defense team aren't required to offer evidence of her innocence. More on that in a moment. But that is totally irrelevant to the discussion outside of the courtroom. Normal, rational people who are trying to form correct opinions about the world around them absolutely should require real and compelling evidence before concluding that an indicted murder defendant is not guilty of the crime they've been charged with. And for far too many people these days, that is just not the case. In the age of true crime bloggers and YouTubers, it seems that a lot of people out there are willing to adopt absurd alternative theories about criminal cases based on little to no actual evidence. You can't just say, butt dials, and then go from there to, she was framed. I don't even that can only be called madness. That can only be called madness. As I've noted before, he says, the supposed evidence that gave rise to the Free Karen Read movement was super thin from the beginning and hasn't held up. By far, the most important of that early evidence was the supposed 227 Google search. I strongly believe that in a world where Celebrite didn't issue that flawed software update, the Free Karen Read movement never would have taken off, and Karen likely would have pled out a long time ago. So thank you, Rich Green. Now, finally, I want to circle back briefly to Brandy's claim that Karen and her defense team don't have to offer any evidence at trial. As I said, this is technically true, but only in a very narrow sense. For example, if the prosecution were to only call a few witnesses and fail to offer evidence even remotely sufficient to establish core elements of the charges against Karen, her team could simply rest their case without calling any witnesses or offering any evidence and still secure an acquittal. Right. But that is not remotely the situation we're dealing with here. As I've noted previously, the prosecution has a ton of evidence against Karen. If all the prosecution did was call the few witnesses needed to explain that Karen was legally intoxicated, that she dropped John off at 34 Fairview, and that his body was found at the same point of drop-off next to the debris field of her taillight pieces, that alone would very likely be sufficient to convict her of vehicular manslaughter, at least if she chose to rest her case without offering any counter evidence. And as we all know, the prosecution has a lot more evidence than just that. So in this case, if Karen wants to be acquitted, she really does have to put on a case and offer compelling evidence to rebut the prosecution's evidence. And it really is fair to ask, both in the courtroom setting and outside, what actual evidence exists to support any of Karen's wild theories about what happened that night. It's not nearly enough to just say that Karen doesn't have the burden of proof. With this much evidence against her, any rational person, whether on the jury or merely following this case in the news, should require Karen and her team to offer pretty compelling evidence before even entertaining the idea that she was framed for this crime. Now, there's a couple more paragraphs, but I just want to comment on that. So, the defense will not have to prove exactly what they believe happened in terms of third-party culprit, but they have to establish real, substantial evidence, real evidence that shows there was some kind of cover-up. And they've not. They've thrown out some weird stuff out there, like the butt dials and the 227 search. Now the 227 search has been completely debunked. The butt dials are butt dials. We'll never know what that means. Butt dials are butt dials. It's to put much meaning on that is crazy. So almost all of the substantial claims that they put out there have been debunked. We now see, even when I was on Court TV the other night with Nick, he's suddenly admitting that he's still saying that the taillight was broken in the driveway, but he's now admitting that it was more than cracked, that it was missing pieces. Because he has to, because we now know that Karen said that. And we've known for a long time, but unfortunately, last time the prosecution chose not to play that audio of the interview with between Gretchen Voss and Karen, with all three of her lawyers present. The interview in which Karen describes seeing the taillight, missing pieces, bulbs exposed, and she actually plucked a piece out and dropped it in the driveway. So they've had to switch gear. So now they're saying that the taillight was crushed, the glass was pushed into the housing. But I mean, that's a change. They weren't saying that until very recently. And they should be asking themselves, well, Karen told Gretchen Voss this. Nick Rocco is talking to Karen Read and her defense lawyers every day. He should be asking, hey, why didn't you guys tell me this? Why did I have to hear about it from Hank Brennan in a hearing? Now, he's heard it from me, but he doesn't believe me. But he's heard it from Hank Brennan, quoting from the transcript in a hearing. And he should be asking, hey, you guys are trotting me out there to tell these tales. Why didn't you tell me that Karen admitted that the taillight was missing pieces when she showed Kerry and Jen that at 5:45. So, anyways, let me get back to the article. And this leads me to the final way in which Brandy and her FKR fellow travelers are wrong. As we've seen in this case, under well-established case law, the defendant actually does have to offer evidence if they are going to pursue a third-party culprit defense. While the burden of proof primarily falls in the prosecution in criminal trials, there are a number of affirmative defenses, such as third-party culprit defense, that do put a burden of proof on the defense. And as we saw in the first trial, and as Judge Cannoni correctly ruled, the defense came nowhere close to meeting this burden with respect to Colin Albert. She's going to allow them to develop a little bit with Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, but only because they were in the house. And she also said in her ruling how thin that was too. And remember, the judge's main goal, other than obviously, look, I think most judges, their goal is fairness. They want the defendant to get a fair trial, especially in a murder case, but in any case. But also, they don't want to be reversed on appeal, so that's something they're ever mindful for. All right. It's worth pausing on that for a moment, because if you've been following this case for the last 3 years, you know that Karen's online supporters have devoted countless words and hours of accusing Colin of murder. Many of them, including Turtle Boy, are still doing so. And yet, despite all that, they've produced precisely zero credible evidence. Not just credible evidence, any evidence that Colin was either at the scene, at the relevant time, or had any conceivable motive. They have literally never shown a morsel of evidence that shows Colin had a motive, had any animosity with John, that he was at the house at that time. They've shown nothing. Yet these people believe this and had thousands of ducks made saying Colin is guilty in the bottom. People have driven up from Florida. There's a wealthy weirdo couple that drove up to Florida just to harass Chris Albert in his place of business. What is it about this case that gets under people's skin and makes them literally go mad? Sociologists are going to have to study this. What kind of human being goes and attacks someone else like that on the basis of zero evidence? Zero evidence. Just stuff put out by the defendant in their blogger. It's unbelievable. It's un-American. Let me continue with the article. When online commentators are speculating that people are guilty of committing heinous crimes, people who haven't been charged with anything, the burden really should be on them, both logically and morally, to produce real evidence to support those accusations. So let's just repeat that. Anonymous says, when online commentators are speculating that people are guilty of committing heinous crimes, people who haven't been charged with anything, the burden really should be on them, both logically and morally, to produce real evidence to support those accusations. And again, they've produced none. In that situation, it is not acceptable to fall back on courtroom-based legal concepts like the defense not having the burden of proof, especially when that kind of baseless speculation wouldn't even be allowed in a courtroom. We don't need to pretend like we're all jurors and that the legal rules constrain our ability to engage in logical analysis and form rational opinions. But we do need to do a lot better job of actually using our brains to analyze the facts and form rational opinions in the first place. So that's another great article. Let's take this off. That's another great article by Anonymous. And it's an interesting, because on Court TV, I'm on with lawyers and Vinny's a lawyer. And that's an angle of thought that I don't think that they've considered. So they should try to reach out to Anonymous if he's even reachable and get him or her. I don't even know if it's a him or a her, but I'm calling him a him for now, but get him on their show and explain that unique angle, because I think that was important for people to hear. All right. Funny Bunny, great to see you. And thank you so much for the donation. Appreciate it. And Countdown says the Lexus data is incriminating, is the word I was told. I have no information on the Lexus other than what Hank said in court a couple weeks ago when he said something to the effect that he said that I don't know if he was specific about what, but in the new data, he mentioned that they have time and place, I think is the way he put it. So that would mean something involving GPS and timestamps. Now, even if we just get the timestamps within the triggered events, that would be huge. Technically, you don't need them because you can get them from correlating with John's phone. But if you have them there, that way you don't have to do that correlation. That's much better because the less you have to ask a juror to think about, the easier it is. Jesse Moore, thank you. Love you, Kev. I'd have your back in a bar fight any day. I would need it these days too. Tom Fleming often had my back in the day. Not sure if Tom is still here. Tom's feeling a little under the weather the last couple of days. He's feeling better today, so he was back on duty. Claire Marie Stewart, always one of our great fans. Thank you, Claire Marie, for your support, as always. Lazy Susan Furman pled the fifth in the OJ case. Karen's new... Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Karen's new cause. Bailey asked... That's F. Lee Bailey, right? The famous lawyer. Have you ever planted evidence? He pled the fifth, and that secured the acquittal. So, yeah, that was... Has he ever explained that? F. Lee Bailey? Does anybody know? I mean, not F. Lee Bailey, Jesus. Jane is Tom's Italian Mastiff beast. So if you're thinking of going down there, Freak AR, bringing a zombie horde down to attack Tom Fleming in his North Carolina lair, just beware. He's got a beast that'll take out any number of you. Did Furman ever address? I know he's done a lot of interviews after that. Did he ever address where he might have planted evidence? Probably not, I assume. So, all right. So, some kind of upcoming plans. So I heard from Court TV last week that they will be in Dedham for a week. They told me the week. I'm not going to say it here just because I'm not sure if they'd want me to. And who knows, it could change, I guess. But it's in May. And obviously they asked if I'd be live in, let's call it studio. They find a location. And I said yes. What I'm thinking of doing, seeing what you guys think of this, is renting a hotel room for a few nights and trying to set it up as a home base for many of us that may want to stop by and just meet each other. Look, there's always a chance when you do that some people will show up to harass us. But it might not happen that way, right? And I don't know. Is that worth? Does that something appeal to any of you to meet us there? And we would obviously try to invite. Well, I've already talked. I know Kate will be there. I don't know if Matt Doherty's planning to come up. I think he lives in Florida, so probably not Matt. Probably not Jen Coffin-Effer unless she comes up too, because she lives. I don't know. I think she lives somewhere down in the Caribbean. I don't know where she lives, but maybe we could get Joe Krowski up. That would be great. And we would be streaming the trial during the day. And obviously I would be going over to Court TV, around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But in between, we could do like a live show. And anybody who wanted to watch, anybody could watch it, but also people might want to, if they wanted to go on the air and say something, I don't know, it would just be kind of cool for us all to be together. Jen Coffin-Effer is in Texas? Oh, I didn't even know that. I don't know why. Why did I think she was in the Caribbean? I don't know. I think she owns a couple houses. Wicked Uma, thank you very much. He says, love the other night on Court TV when you told the world Karen Reed was the only one with a motive to delete the doorbell footage. Yep. Yeah. People have told me that in their opinion, Nick seemed a little bit flustered the other night. I don't know. So I'm just looking through the comments to see if you guys think this would be a fun idea. So if we get Miss Kara says, I'm down. Jules, the one and only, says she'll come out. A rare Jules appearance. So that'll be cool. Elise will be welcome to come. Just looking through the comments. Lazy Susan said I'd be down for it, but I don't know what week I'd be there. So I'm not sure how far you're traveling from. You can reach out to me. All right. So if somebody is planning on traveling here for the month of May and they want to know the specific week that this might be going on, email me. So my email is leitskev, LEITSKEV @gmail.com. And if I recognize who you are, I will definitely tell you, when this is happening. It's nothing is, I haven't reserved any hotel rooms yet. And I have to see what funds are there first before, hotels is fairly expensive in that area. So depending how much funding I can come up with, I can do it for 2 or 3 days. Something just kind of, but I thought it would be just good to have a home base. Because there's in the Hilton there's actually plenty of little, not there are some big conference rooms, but there's plenty of little areas where you could set up, just put your computers there and set up. They're kind of, people can walk through and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to do it. I don't think we'd want to do it in like just a room, like a bedroom. If more than a few people showed up, it would get crowded and weird. So I think we would probably set up like that. I wish Tom Fleming was here. He could be our production manager. The Holiday Inn right there across from Legacy Place has a great restaurant downstairs. All right, well, we'll look at that. Thank you, Mac Dickies. And it says, don't do the Garden Inn. And the only one I'm familiar with is the Hilton. I stayed for a couple of nights last year at the Hilton, and it was pretty nice. They had a gym in there, good sized gym. I like that, so I can work out a couple of times. I got to figure out my own medical treatment schedule too, but I believe that by that time, I will either be done my treatments or I will have one chemo treatment on one day. And my guess is it would be Thursday or Friday. So I just need to, but I'm close to Boston, so I can just go into Boston, have the treatment, and come home. Come back to the hotel. Mo lives in Dedmon and would love that. All right, that'll be great, Mo. So Zoom the party, yeah. Jeff is not going to make it. Jeff Pogue, he's too far away. I know that. And thank you for the memberships. Thank you. Countdown, yes, Kevin, we would come. Western Mass, Mark says he'd come too. So all right, so let's Jack T, the idea is for the week in May during the trial that Court TV will be up of renting a room at the Hilton. And if I think at the Hilton is the place I would, I'm sure we could find something a little cheaper, but there's a lot of stuff right there to walk to. So if somebody else decides they want to come up and also rent that room there is it's like a very mercantile area. There's cinemas and restaurants and shops and stuff like that. So I'll definitely give you more than a day's notice, Jules. Mary, my email is leitskev, Leits, LEITSKEV at gmail.com. And Debbie, the live studio audience. So last time when I was there for the Court TV shoot, on the first night, there was not many people there and the fans. So the producer asked me, said, hey, can you try to get some people here, friends, family, stuff like that, so we can make the place look busier? And I said, well, yes. I said, if I can put out the word, but what you're going to get here is all one side. It's all going to be free Karen Reed. I said, that's okay with me. But even though I'm putting out the word, they're the ones that'll see it, And they're like, that's okay. So the next night I went and the place was jam-packed with free Karen Reed people. But I got along with most of them. But I had the feeling it'll be different now. When I saw them this summer, everything had changed. There was no longer mutual respect. They looked at me like the devil. Oh, so let's talk while I'm reading through these comments too. So I find Karen's recent comments and Vanity Fair to be really interesting. About the OJ case. Let's see if I save them and I'll bring them up for you guys. Yeah, close my thing. All right, let's see. Yeah, this was something else. Yeah, I can't find it. Anyways, but Karen said basically, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't have it. She goes, well, the way I look at the OJ case now, it's not that he didn't do it, but that he should be acquitted because of police corruption. Now, I find it really, really interesting that she puts that out there now. Is that maybe where they're going now? Like they know the evidence against her is so compelling. I'll write it in here for you guys. Do they know? Does she know? Do they know that the evidence against her is so compelling that now they're counting on a kind of jury nullification where people decide that because that this investigation was corrupt or Proctor didn't like her and stuff like that, that based on that, thank you, Pat, that based on that, and Mary, I'm seeing, so yes, you emailed me, correct me. That's the correct one. And so Pat thank you, Pat, sends me the quote from Vanity Fair. Karen says, I felt so strongly about the prosecution and his guilt and the fact that he spent all this money on this dream team of lawyers. They all looked like snake oil salesmen to me. So she's talking about how she looked at the OJ case back at the time. Now, however, she's changed her mind. She says, I'm not saying that I believe OJ was innocent, but I believe that it was not a completely above board investigation. Now that I am smarter, I would have cheered at that acquittal. You have to hold cops accountable. Now, we can, thank you, Pat, because you can really parse these words. So weird that she mentioned he spent all his money on a dream team of lawyers. Karen has a lot of lawyers, kind of her own little dream team for a private citizen, for a non-celebrity. And she's saying, I'm not saying I believe OJ was innocent, but I believe that it was not a completely above board investigation. Now, I find that to be an interesting choice of words. Why wouldn't she say this? I'm not saying I believe OJ was innocent, but I believe the police were corrupt. Isn't that the easier way to say it? But she doesn't say that. She says the police that it was not a completely above board investigation. See, why doesn't she say, I'm not saying I believe OJ was innocent, but I believe that Furman planted the glove? Why doesn't she say that? The reason, I think, is because she knows that the charge of saying this investigation is weak. There's no evidence of it. There's no evidence anything was planted. And I'm talking about her own investigation. There's no evidence that anything was planted, manufactured, falsified. So she says that OJ should have been acquitted because the investigation was not completely above board. That's what she's trying to say, is people should acquit her for the same reason. They're not going to acquit her because evidence was planted, because no evidence was planted. They're not going to acquit her because she was framed, despite what David Yannetti said in the first trial, because there's no evidence she was framed. There's no evidence. So now she's backed into this. She's walking the plank in the old pirate movies, and she is on the end looking around, and the sharks are in the water. She's running out of space. And all she has left is to say, well, this was not a completely above board investigation. Well, probably no investigation ever was like that. She says you have to hold the cops accountable. So what she's saying here is again, this is called jury nullification. She's saying, even if you think I did this, you have to hold the cops accountable. And the only way to do that is by acquitting me. That is what she's saying. That is the very last stance of a weak defense. For those people out there in Free Karen Reed land, just look at Karen's own statements and you'll know how weak the defense is based on her own statements. It's that simple. All right, I'm just looking for questions. Has anything else come up? Artwork says, yes, sounds a great idea. He will be there. It's awesome. So I believe we learned today or yesterday that the Supreme Court is not going to stop the jury impanelment. There is still a remote chance that they will take on the case. Someone had a good comment up here, but it's all right. I'll try to get this up here. The longer ones are hard when chat moves. The box moves. If you were able to assist in jury selection, what juror profile would you consider ideal? What type of person would you use your peremptory challenges on? Well, I may have to keep some of that secret. um, but it does seem to me that most of the fervent advocates here are people in their 40s and 50s. And more likely to be, well, I would say the women are likely to be women that have some kind of profession or some kind of solid job, um, nurses and stuff like that. Yet they still believe in this. Um, make everyone take an IQ test. Yeah. Who's aged 5 years and 1 year? Turtle Boy? Can Hank ask Lucky about being blackmailed? I know the blackmail story, and I actually even know the information that Turtle Boy has. I've known it for a long time. That could be used to blackmail Lucky, but there's no point talking about it. And I don't actually think that he was blackmailed, because he told some version of that story to Paul Mikowski, the private investigator, long before Turtle Boy had his hands on this story. So I believe what happened with Lucky was he was manipulated by the private investigators employed by David Yannetti. And look, I'm not trying to besmirch those private investigators, but everything we've seen from David Yannetti is shady. This is how he operates, right? I mean, showing up with his investigator, having Lucky meet them at the elementary school parking lot where Courtney Proctor was working. So the day before Proctor was going to testify, when the kids were in school, choosing that time and place, knowing that it was going to cause a stir. Man, this guy's dirty. This guy's not a good person. A good person wouldn't do to Allie McCabe on the stand what David Yannetti did. There is no tactic that they won't shrink from. And I will never respect it. And so, to me, getting David Yannetti using presumably private investigators that he'd used a long time to manipulate in a way to help them, I'm sure that's par for the course. I'm just guessing, you know. Oh, thank you, Joe. Yes, the book seems to be doing well. It's called Storm of Suspicion on Amazon. So, got the link on the screen there. I'm not even sure if you can. Actually, you can't. You'd have to write it down. So that's not the best way to do it. But I put the description in. I put the link also in the description of this video, so you can find that on YouTube. Thank you, Tom. I think they took advantage of him, tricked him. I think there may have even been a point early on that he thought he was helping the Alberts, was just easily confused. Well, I'll tell you, Mac Dickies, Lucky's testimony doesn't make sense. There wasn't enough snow to be out there plowing at 2:30. There was only a dusting at that time. So I think his times are off. And we know that he took David Yannetti by surprise on the stand with the time. When David Yannetti asked him, when was the last time you plowed the street? He thought Lucky was going to say 6:30, which wouldn't have made sense. So again, these people aren't geniuses because the street was blocked off at 6:30. But when Lucky said 5:30, which I think was the truth, Yannetti was stunned. He wished he could have put that cat back in the bag, but unfortunately, Adam Lally didn't take advantage of it and ask Lucky, did you see a body at 5:30? Obviously, he didn't. No, I'm going to say no, Fogger. I'm not a lawyer, but can Proctor say what the text was that made him? No, that's going to be attorney-client privilege. No, absolutely not. Now, whether whether he can say it in an interview with somebody, that's different. I don't know, but I don't think he actually seems like the kind of guy that wants to do that. Maybe after the trial is over or something like that, but I don't think he wants to interfere with the justice process, despite what people think. Snowplowers don't have cameras. Yeah, they probably should, but I mean, it's a small town. They had shitty cameras in the police station, so. To me, it's not a matter of trusting Lucky or Proctor, Gabe. I trust in the evidence. I trust in evidence that is not connected to testimony. I trust in the physical evidence and I trust in the data. I trust in the type of things that I trust in timelines that are unshakable. That's what I trust in. I don't know Michael Proctor. I don't know Lucky Laughlin. I don't know any of these people. I've met some of them through the course of this, but I didn't know any of them before that. So I don't give anybody the benefit of the doubt. Anything's possible, right? I go by the evidence. I go by the logic. I go by the timeline. That's it. I agree with Countdown. There is zero chance, zero, that you get 12 people to a not guilty. And I don't think the defense thinks that there's any chance of that either. The defense hope is to get one or two people that have made up their mind before they went on there, or that have an overreaction to Proctor's texts, and they get so mad at the police that they say not guilty, and so you have another hung jury. That's the prosecution's hope. I'm sorry, that's the defense's hope, and that's it. This isn't really that hard. That's their hope. And because of all the circus around this and the expense, they're hoping that the state won't try it again. Now, the state, the county, the Norfolk County DA's office has told the family they'll try it as many times as necessary, but we'll see. Oh, there is not zero chance to get 12 people to be guilty. Look, that's not even rational. And I'll tell you why that's not rational. All right. I feel everybody's welcome to their opinion, but I can tell you why that's not rational. Because 8 or 9 of the jurors in the last trial, despite the incredible flaws of that trial, voted guilty. All right. So the majority of the jurors voted guilty on the last trial. Now you're going to see a much better trial this time. Even if you just went with the evidence that we had last time, with no new, and we don't know what new vehicle data they might have, but even if they have none, this trial is going to be 1,000 times more effective. And it would have been even if Adam Lally was doing it, because he would have learned from his mistakes. But now you have a brilliant lawyer that also gets to learn on the mistakes and focus on the things, tighten up where it needs to be tightened up. So, for instance, a huge benefit that Hank Brennan will have is that the county now understands that state police experts don't always make the best testifiers. So you got to go out and hire the type of experts that are used to testifying and used to doing these kind of analysis and for a profession. So they did that this time. They didn't do that last time. other than Ian Whiffen and Jessica Hyde to prove that there was the 227 aspect and that stuff. I don't think the state had any professional experts, but now we're going to get professional accident reconstructionists. We're going to get a neurosurgeon. We're going to get a dog bite expert. So this is this is going to be a very different trial. And it does seem that they do have some kind of significant new information from the text team. And it was hinted at by Brennan. He talked about time and place, whether it was from the text stream or whether it was from John's phone and the temperature log on his phone. I don't know. We don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there's going to be more there. So there is a reasonable chance that you can. So last time you had 8 or 9 guilty votes. Pretty good chance they're going to build on that, which means there's a fairly good chance you'll get to 12. And they obviously, based on what we're seeing this week about the number of jurors who were selected and then dismissed the next day, the state's doing a lot harder work in trying to get to the bottom of people who are sneaking onto that jury despite being free Karen readers that have already participated in the process. Or who knows, maybe people on this side too. I mean, we want fair jurors that have not already made up their mind one way or the other. That's what we want. That's what we want. That's not what they want, but it's funny. Isn't that funny? Maybe we can finish on that because I don't want this to be too long of a show. It's funny that we frequently hear everybody on this side, our side, say we just want fair, impartial jurors. That's all we want. I have never once heard anybody say that on the other side. I never hear Turtle Boy say that. I never hear Nick Rocco say that. I don't hear anybody. Have any of you guys ever heard anybody on the other side, even the lawyers? I don't listen to her show, but Melanie Little or I don't know, the little dudes that Young Jelly has on, like Bettero and stuff like that. Do any of these guys ever say that all we really want are fair jurors? Has anybody ever heard them say that? I don't think it's what they want. Jefferson and not whole. Oh. I don't know the answer to that. If in fact it was count 2 the jury was hung on, doesn't that indicate they believe Karen Reed hit John? The intent is what hung them up. No, Mandy. I would say that that's not accurate. So, count 1 was leaving the scene of the accident. Count 3 was second degree, and that's where the intent comes in. And count 2 was OUI manslaughter. And I would say that they were hung up on whether it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen's Lexus struck John. And it's not completely without reason because the state didn't. So the defense produced these ARCA guys who said it was unlikely that John was struck by a vehicle. Meanwhile, the state, which knew for over a year that the defense was going to say John was attacked by a dog, didn't even try to explain those injuries. Didn't really, they said it was caused by the taillight, I think, but they didn't say how or why. How did the taillight make those parallel lines on John's arm? They didn't even offer an effort. So, I mean, in some ways it is, it just was, I think one of the reasons that it came close to being as guilty as it did is because the witnesses actually came across so well and the defense came across as so shady that actually I think that cost the defense a lot. Because the state really did. It's almost stunning how bad a job the state did here. And I'm not trying to insult anybody there because I think Adam Lally is a good guy and he's a smart guy. But what the F? This was a really poorly thought out campaign. This is no way to run a trial. You don't have to be a lawyer to say that. And I'm not a lawyer. Yeah, I've seen my cousin Vinny. All right. No, but I was saying this during the trial. And everything I said during the trial, you could say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a lawyer. Okay. And I would say, sure. But then later on, when we saw what the jurors that have talked about the case, what they've said, they basically said all the same stuff that I was saying were a problem. I mean, like 100%. So everything went bad from the opening statements of Adam Lally to the strategy So first of all, in those opening statements, they really didn't. You're supposed to give a roadmap. They didn't. They really didn't give a roadmap as to what they were going to prove, as to what their theory was. And so the jury had no idea until about 9 weeks later. They had to spend the first 8 weeks listening to the debunking of the conspiracy theory in a very slow and mind-numbing way, asking people what beers they drink and where they parked. I got to think that some of those jurors seriously contemplated putting a gun to their head. It was unbelievable. And I'm not even saying it'd be one thing if you at least brought in the witnesses initially to showed what the state's theory was. But it's a really bad feeling to leave think about it this way. Let's say one of the most powerful tools in writing a story. So your TV show, your favorite movie, a book is suspension, right? So you create a question and then you wait until you answer it. That's called suspension. And it builds that, if it's done properly, it builds that intrigue. But if you wait too long to answer that question, it becomes annoying. It becomes torture to the audience. You can't do that. So we left these poor juries here. The state, all they knew was the state said John was struck by Karen's Lexus. And they didn't hear any evidence to support that or what the theory was until 8 weeks, 9 weeks later. That had to piss that jury off. Because they didn't know where you're just up in the air, like you're swimming in an open sea, not able to see the land. You don't know where you're going. You're like, what is the point here? I don't know why. They didn't even know much about the defense's theory at that point. So like, why are they asking all these questions? What is the point of this? Who in their right mind thought that was a good idea as a trial strategy? I'm still stunned, and I don't want to be unfair to them, but I went back and watched much of the testimony again in preparation for the book, and it just made it worse. It didn't make it better. It made it more frustrating. Like, my God, what is going on here? You want to take them and shake them and say, no, don't do this. This is stupid. You're going to lose. You deserve to lose. Fortunately, they didn't lose. Fortunately, they get another crack at it. And if they get the win, I do want Larry to share in that win for all his hard work and for all his integrity and decency. But my God, he should never be in charge of a big trial again. Come on. Not without help. Not without someone that could sit down and guide him into a strategy. That was inexcusably bad. Oh, shit. Can you just see you try to catch something and every time I try to stop something, it moves the chat window. Did I see the beautiful tribute Julie Grant did for John? No, I didn't see it. I actually don't watch TV unless it's sports for the most part, unless there's something happening in the world. So I think Julie Grant's openings are brilliant when I've seen them, but I don't really see them too often. And I don't really see Vinny's show either, except when I'm on there. It had his friends on. Oh, I that was the picture I saw in Jam's. I guess that from Jam's video from earlier. And I think Brendan and John Jackson were on there. Brendan Kane. And I didn't. Was it Tara? It didn't really look like Tara, the woman on there. Maybe it was. Tara's a former girlfriend of John who stayed friends. I'm not sure if that was Tara. I only saw that little picture there that was in Jam's video. So let's go with Red Skies. Good question. Why hasn't Karen leaked the card data? Well, So what I said months ago when they were getting that new car data, I said the only way we're really going to learn anything about what's in it is from Karen, and we'll have to read the tea leaves. And so if they got nothing new, Karen would have leaked out that they got nothing new. So the fact that she hasn't leaked that out means they probably had something new and something that bothers them. So we'll see just how troubling it is. Yes, David, we went over the O.J. Simpson thing a little while ago. If you scroll back, you'll see we did. Christina, the Celtics, it's almost playoffs times. Hopefully, Jaylen Brown gets healthy. Well, Linda, the problem wasn't just courtroom presence. That strategy they went with. What the F? He's, it's just unbelievable. Like the key thing was to correlate that data between John's phone, which was held by Trooper Garino, and the vehicle data that Trooper Paul had. And neither of those troopers were ever put together or given the report of the other. So they didn't know about that correlation. Lally should have known about it. I was able to pick it up during the trial and put together with the help from Chick from the Bricks to help us make that graphic that really helps display it. If an idiot like me can figure it out, Lally should be able to figure it out. And he should have made sure those two key witnesses had access to each other's information. There was nothing illegal about a trooper using the analysis of another trooper as part of his conclusion. So, for instance, Trooper Paul didn't document the location of each piece of taillight that was collected. That was the crime. That was the crime scene people that did that. But he uses that information in his report. So if he had been given the John's phone data, he could have used that in his report and come up with that correlation. And it's slam dunk. So Lally only spent 1 day preparing with Trooper Paul. That's the most important witness. That's the most important witness for your side. The guy that's going to tell the jury what happened. And he spent 1 day with him. There's no excuse for that. Lally's I don't know who came up with the strategy, but he was the trial lawyer, so I got to assume it was him. It was his strategy to spend 8 weeks going over, basically rebutting the defense conspiracy theory and not giving the jury any sense of what happened. That was his strategy. So it's not just that he was not dynamic in the courtroom. I actually think in a lot of ways his presentation style was effective because he comes across as kind of a just the facts kind of guy. And I think that impresses the jury, even though it might put him to sleep a little bit. At the end of the day, they trust him. So I think his style is actually a little bit of variety would help. Don't ask every question, phrase it the same way. God, even people in the 7th grade understand you can't do that because you're going to lose people's interest. But other than that, I think his style had some benefits. It was the strategy that was the problem. Oh, yeah, Manny. It was way more than cracked. And that's in Karen's words. And you can tell Nick is struggling with this when he talks about it on court TV. They've been trotting him out there to tell something that they knew wasn't true, that he didn't know, but they knew. Sarah says she was still reversing after she hit him, right? So her headlights shined on him and she had to have seen him. I don't really the problem with that is we just don't know. We don't know where she was looking. So when you're going in reverse, granted, today with today's cameras, you might be looking at the screen, but many of us still, when you're going in reverse, you look backwards. So we don't know where she was looking when she was going in reverse. So we don't know exactly what her headlights were on. Just like when the people inside the party, when they went home, we don't know what they saw or didn't see either. We just know they didn't see John, but it's just too hard to speculate on things like that. We can't. There's no reason to be certain that her headlights picked up John and that she was looking in that direction. Will T be allowed in the courtroom? I don't know. He shouldn't be. I don't get it. I've talked to a retired judge somewhat regularly, and she has some criticisms for Judge Canoni, but overall approves of the work she's done. But he really doesn't understand why Turtle Boy is allowed in the courtroom. All right. My back is bothering me, so I'm gonna answer. I'm gonna make this the last question. Do you think there is enough evidence to prove intent? Driving drunk and enraged is not an excuse. Well, so what are the aspects of intent that we know with some degree of certainty? One of them is the fact that she knew that she had had too much to drink, and yet she was driving. No question. I don't think that there's any suggestion that she accidentally went in reverse with her foot slamming the gas 70% for at least 5 seconds, reaching a speed of 24 miles per hour. That is pretty close to certainly intent. Intent for what? You can quibble about the intent for what, but there's a level of intent there. And that's really the third prong of second-degree murder. That's kind of called sometimes the reckless endangerment clause. If you participate and if you do something that you should know could lead to death or serious injury to somebody else, that's second degree. So, that's one type of intent. Now, there's other types of intent. If you believe that she would have her alarms in her car would have screamed and shouted that she was about to strike something and she ignored them. If you believe that she felt the impact, because even though the impact was only from his elbow to the taillight, that still would have made a fairly significant sound. If you believe that she heard that and didn't take any action to see if anybody was hurt, that could be intent. If you believe at some point after she went home, at any point, that she believed that she had struck John and that John was wounded, and she didn't call 911. And that for me is where you get close to intent there too. I don't believe that the evidence tells us, certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt, that when Karen first got home, that she knew she had struck John or anybody. Maybe she did, but there's really no evidence of it. There's no evidence of it. There's nothing in those voicemails that suggests she knew John was hurt or that she'd been in an accident. Now, the fact that the Ring video of Karen coming home at 12:36 is missing is suspicious, because we would think that the incentive she would have for deleting that would be because she examined the taillight. If she examined the taillight, then she knew something had happened. But we don't even know that Karen deleted the Ring video. We don't know who deleted them. It's not proven. So if they could prove that Karen deleted the video, those Ring videos, then that gets us closer. But even still, does that really prove that that's why she deleted him? Because she looked at the taillight. Does that prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't know. But I do think that once she woke up at 4:30, something changed. Clearly something changed in her reaction. So from her calling up Camarado's wife, Mrs. Camarado, at the hospital where she worked, then calling Jen McCabe, then calling Kerry Roberts. Those were all indication, and her strange statements. John's dead, hit by a plow. Those are all strange statements. And also the fact that she called her parents 3 times in the morning. Now, that's not proof of anything, but it might add a little bit of weight to the fact that she knew something very, very bad had happened. And yeah, it would be interesting if they can prove that she went back there. Now, I don't know. To this point, you can't. All they know is that now her location data had been turned off for some time in her phone, and all they know is based on cell tower data that she went back in that direction. But that doesn't prove that she went down that street. Even if she did go down that street, that wouldn't prove that she saw John in the snow. So we don't really have proof of that. If there's something new in the vehicle data that shows that she went down Fairview, would that do it? Well, not if she just drove down. I would say no. But if it shows that she stopped in the vicinity where John was found for any length of time, then that kind of would probably prove that she knew. But I don't know if we're going to find that. And also, if the data show, what would really be powerful is if the data showed that she stopped at, say, 523 in that location. Now, I don't think the data will show this. I just don't think that the data will be that good. But if the data is that good, that we know exactly where Karen's car went, and it showed that she stopped at the far edge of the property near John's body for any length of time, then you go to Lucky's testimony, who saw a vehicle there. What he says at 3:30, but he's clearly confused sometimes. And he said he saw an SUV sitting there with the lights off. So if you can convince the jury, so if the evidence shows that Karen stopped there at, say, 523 or in that time frame, and we know Lucky said he plowed around that time too, then you could possibly convince the jury that what Lucky really saw was Karen sitting there, and the fact that she had the lights out will be proof of consciousness of guilt. I think that would be a slam dunk for second degree. But a lot has to happen for that to be shown. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for being here. And I'm not sure when I'll be on next, but feeling pretty good. Who knows? Maybe this weekend. We'll see what else is going on. And the weather is looking more spring-like next week. It's looking cold the next couple of days, but Monday, Tuesday, going to be in the 60s. I think the trial is going to be starting on Tuesday, and we will have it covered here with our usual panel. And there will be mornings when you don't see me on it first. Those are mornings that I'm going into Boston. But don't worry, Kate, who's much smarter than me, she has my password. She will get it going, and then I'll be back. And so we'll talk. So we'll have it covered no matter what every day. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy your week.